Hi, Pierre. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year at the point in publishing. Hope you're well. If my voice breaks or there's a little crackle in it, not being too well at the moment, as I mentioned to you, but on the old antibiotics, which are working their magic at the moment, so I'm feeling a lot better. But I thought I'd crack on. Anyway, just running back the video, really cool to sort of see a run of swings in a row from you to get an idea of sort of the consistency. And although I've picked one here, which I think is reflective of one of your decent swings, I think we'd have to agree, and we'll get into that in a second. Did notice when we had a little bit of a wobble. I think it was the swing before to this with your iron down the line there. Just sort of a little bit of a minor loss of balance, but I'm assuming that that's not every time. Certainly the way you set up to your shots implies that there's enough balance there to do good things with, so I think overall it's good. But nice flow to it. You're getting on with it. Not too clear what my target is here, so to some degree, again, the usefulness of having a few swings in a row helps me, because I can sort of look at your body language. That's that croak I told you about. I can look at your body language a little bit and get a decent steer on whether you felt like it was a decent swing. And I can see the ball flight pretty well against the background there, and this one looks like it was pretty satisfactory. Would be good ultimately to have some numbers on that, because we can discuss and we can talk about how we might improve things as and when those numbers point us in a certain direction. But I don't know how easy it is to get hold of some technology that could show you stuff like that. I mean, simplest things probably club speed, possibly ball speed, but angles of approach, launch angle, spin rate, things like that, very, very useful. Without further ado, let's just, as we're witnessing this swing over and over, let's make a start, and a standardized sort of thing that I like to do, which I think is a good honest thing, is a nice sort of sideways on cross section of your swing. So we take this plane line, if you like, this ideal biomechanical swing, plane path, if you like. We take it through the sort of bottom of your armpits, middle of your armpits. We can measure that, so you can see me drawing this in again. There we go, trying to be reasonably precise, and there's a point there in the middle of your upper sternum, which would be the sort of central point for your golf swing. Loving the flare out of your lead foot, very, very common, very normal, good to see. Do like to see the back of the arms or the back of the shoulders sort of vertically above the kneecaps or thereabouts. You could probably improve the condition of your upper back a little bit. Shoulders a tiny bit rounded, but it's certainly not chronic. There's a decent alignment between your hips, sternum, and maybe your ears hanging a little bit forward of that, but I'll mention that when I'm outside giving you a little bit of a demo. But possibly a little bit of curvature to the upper back. This line won't stay curved. Oh, actually, there you go. It didn't bother straightening it for me. A tiny bit, and that might contribute to the lack of mobility in your upper body rotation, which I may have mentioned before, because it would be a pretty fundamental thing. But before we get too deep in the weeds on that, arms hanging directly down from the shoulders, always nice to see. Not massive amounts of space between the club and your hands, which preempts the possibility of making impact conditions slightly difficult if your proximity is a little sort of close to the ball. So standing a little bit further away and holding your sort of drawing your shoulder blades towards one another, pushing your chest out a little bit, improving the condition of your upper sternum, the upper part of your back, getting that into a little bit more alignment, might well have a desirable effect on your mobility in your backswing. More on that in a short while, but for now, really, really good here, has to be said. Club staying outside the hands until a point where the club becomes approximately horizontal with the ground. The left arm and the shaft pointing backwards almost perfectly towards the target. Lots and lots of coaches are going to point out the symmetry, the way the shaft of the club goes up your right forearm there. Can you see that? That's very, very popular. Just coming back a peg there. Just a hair underneath that biomechanical plane. It depends how accurately I've drawn it and how accurately we're filming it from in relation to the target line. But I think toe to the sky, or maybe slightly pointing downwards, the face pointing slightly downwards at this point, are always acceptable. sort of indications that the club is still square to your swing. Another point, once we've gone up through that right forearm, the shaft there, the club arriving a little bit underneath the ideal biomechanical plane, but very much parallel, so much so that it's hidden by your hands. If we just kind of take the action back or forward a smidge, you can see the way the leading edge of the club sits perfectly in alignment with the shaft, which is basically telling us that's a square club face. So all of this here, lined up, the left forearm, not too much curve in the back of your left wrist, not too much cup as well, so not too much sort of convexness this way and not too much arch that way. Very, very square that way. It won't let me draw that line. See, it tries to make it so that's better. So if your wrist was bowed outwards like that, or it was cupped inwards as I just demonstrated, then that would suggest openness or closeness, closeness or openness respectively. You might have to wind that back and listen again, but an arched or a bowed wrist would imply closed face, which is what I'm illustrating there if it was like that, which is not. If it was cupped, if it was inverted, the angle of the back of the left wrist was more this way. I say this way, there we go, then you'd have the toe of the club drooping downwards, and that would be an open club face. So I think, all in all, really good work, mate. Really good work. One last thing that I like to check in on, vertically, you'd want the mass of the club to be above your base, teetering on the brink of your heels, but you see that in a lot of players, favouring a sort of slightly, you could call it slightly flatter, slightly under the biomechanical plane, but if you're keen to shallow the club and deliver from underneath the plane on the way forward, it's not a bad thing, not a terrible thing, doesn't get you in dire straits, can still achieve very good and desirable impact conditions, so really, really good. The piece de resistance for me, beautiful sequencing of your forward swing, plenty of rotation in the hips there, a little bit of flexion left in the right arm and the elbow and hip quite close together. So really decent, really decent. I think for the record, beside you on the screen, I will stick an example of somebody that will be known to you, which I came across actually this very morning. Some rare footage from a 1990 Tiger Woods playing competitively as a junior golfer in the US Junior Amateur, which I think he won 3 times, no less. But, very, very important trends and very, very often overlooked elements, and people find, people can convey them in quite confusing ways. From my Instagram feed, they're dancing around the subject the whole time, but you achieve very decent impact conditions, and that's why the flight of the ball is nice. Releasing through the ball, you can see the club again aligns with your ideal biomechanical swing plane, and at this point doesn't really matter, it's just the body accepting that energy that's gone through it. Flaring out of the left arm is a good way to soften the muscles in the left side and just allow your body to put the brakes on. Beautifully balanced and poised. This, a good sign for me, it shows that you've allowed the ankle, knee and hip to not be overstressed, and that's what's helping your forward rotation. Your body is able to rotate better because it's pivoting somewhat on that left heel. That's a very common and more modern phenomenon to allow that to happen. To some people's eyes, it can look a bit ugly, but I don't think so. I think it's a great sign that you've allowed your body to rotate and put pressure on the ball at impact. So I think it's really good, my dear chap. Fine work, really is. If it ends up me on a monthly basis telling you to keep doing what you're doing, then there's worse things that could happen in conjunction with recruiting a coach online, I think. But that's just my opinion, my dear chap. Right, let's have a look from in front. Same deal here with your front on footage. I think mostly really, really good. Couple of the things that I've asked you to do really coming together. I think a nice bit of flair to the lead foot, as we've highlighted from the down the line angle, but more obvious in this video. Stance width, I think that would be something that would be consistent throughout your game. You needn't necessarily widen or narrow that for any full swing. Looks like you're using a 6, maybe a 5 here, and just ever so fractional forward lean to the shaft makes sense with the kind of conditions you want to get the shaft in at impact. Let's see how similarly the club aligns at impact here. I think we miss impact, which is a pain in the butt. Happens a lot, but it's 0.004 of a second, so you don't get to see it a lot. But I think at this stage, safe to say that impact looking like the hands are going to be a fraction in front of the club-headed impact, which is a consistently solid pattern for good ball strikers, especially with irons where the shaft is designed to lean forwards a little bit up until about, usually with modern clubs, up until about 4-iron, 3-iron. They get a bit of a backward lean to them, which is more characteristically like woods, but that is something we account for in our ball position. So your ball position being slightly forward makes sense. Really good. Nice tall left side, curved right side. Possibly could exaggerate that more. Show you what I mean when I'm outside, I think, on that. But if you exaggerated a tall left side, curved right side more, it would speak to the kind of impact conditions you're trying to get into. So it's just a feel thing. It's not like it is make or break, but just a feel thing. But your alignment on the previous image when we looked down the line, I mean, so solid. You know, feet, knees, hips, forearms, shoulder alignment, all very much parallel with your intended target line. Wouldn't mind seeing some drivers, buddy. Wouldn't mind if you let this be a heads up. Wouldn't mind seeing some drivers on camera. May not be something that's troubling you, which is why I've not seen much from you on that. But, you know, if you're still hell-bent on getting this to be super solid, then that's all fine and dandy. But I agree with you. Little movement off-centre, but not chronic. Little movement off-centre as we near the end of the backswing, which I think was one of your major bugaboos. Probably flexibility related, but, you know, you look at that, there's more than 90 degrees of shoulder rotation there. Shoulders get a little bit flatter, but it's not like chest gets sort of towards the sky type rotation, which not many people are going to recommend for an iron shot particularly. But I don't like to say that you're nitpicking, but I will throw in a couple of examples of players who do move off centre a little bit and then re-centre, which is what you do. And I'm going to chuck in a nice little drill that you can throw into the mix, which I think you'll quite like, just for training purposes. But this may be your Eleanor, as they call it, your Pegasus. This may be your thing that you find trickiest to maintain. But often with players, you know, you've got certain characteristic traits that you know, you just have to keep on top of and are challenging for you or anyone. Mine, personally, is my backswing not getting too short, too under-rotated. I get lazy. Really can't say the same thing for you here. But that tendency to sort of move towards the target with irons is not going to be destructive. That's why I want to see what's happening with your driver. I want to make sure that's not happening, because that's not a tactic that really is going to work particularly well. So just to give you an idea, I think when we watch this fellow here, starting position of his head, ball sort of vertically below his left ear, and through impact, he doesn't really, I mean, we're not going to accuse him of moving, leaning towards the target and getting in front of the ball, which is sustainable for irons. You can get a little bit in front of the ball with an iron. It's not the end of the world. If you're too aggressive, it will cause problems, as with anything in golf and in life. If you overdo it too much, often is too much. But for us, keeping your head steady, moving towards the target fractionally, if you wanted to get in front of that ball a little bit, it would depend on how much loft and the type of ball flight you're trying to create that would you know, determine whether you could be a bit more aggressively sort of leaning into it, getting your left shoulder in front of this yellow line. That's another point that I like to raise here. At any point your left shoulder gets in front of that line is worthy of note, but it's not super destructive. And you can see they're very disciplined, very centered. That's what's giving your swing such a look of grace and elegance at the moment, and is really going to work well, especially with mid and long irons. On those short irons, I think you can afford to have the ball further back, and that in itself would put the centre of your swing in relation to the low point in your swing, would put you further ahead of the ball. So if your centre of gravity is roughly there, the low point in your swing is going to be roughly at the back of the ball, or maybe a hair before the ball. But there's no intention for any turf interaction with this type of club. You don't need to take a monster divot. With shorter clubs, you can hit down more. You can spin the ball more, because obviously when you get to closer range, you might want to hit down on the ball and grate the back of the ball with a more downward angle of approach. You know, if you're more severe in your downwardness, not great when you're hitting driver, because obviously you risk topping it, or you risk driving it into the ground, or you risk, if you do make good contact with it, it will start very low but have a lot of spin on it, so it might rise up, but it will land very softly and you won't get maximum distance. With an iron, it's a bit different, of course. You know, if you've got a pitching wedge in your hand, you might want to flight one in there low with lots of spin, and it might bounce and go forwards with the first bounce, but on the second bounce it will check up. So it's worth mucking about with that, starting with your head, you know, perhaps slightly in front of the ball with your shorter irons. You know, and you can imagine the rest of your swing being further forward than that. If your swing was identical, we just shifted it, almost like a silhouette of your swing. We just shifted it so your head was inside the space that I've drawn there, then your hands would be approximately here. And if the ball position stayed the same, then the shaft would be leaning forwards more, and you'd effectively, if you made the swing, you'd be hitting down onto it more. So by and large, it would be done, you know. So just by shifting your swing towards the target pre-shot, before you hit the shot, you can hit down on it more and create more spin. But with the type of club that it looks like you're using there, quite a mid to long iron, you know, we don't want to create excessive spin. You know, just to give you a hint here, if you think about the ideal amount of spin, if you do get to look at the numbers, the ideal amount of spin, take the number on the bottom of your club, multiply it by 1,000 and minus 1,000, and you get pretty much, so if it was a 7 iron, let's say, then 7,000 RPM minus 1,000, 6,000 RPM would be pretty good spin rate for a 7 iron to function in most situations. You know, a little bit more spin might come in handy sometimes and a little bit less spin other times, but if you hovered around 6,000, you'd be doing okay. So if you do get privy to any of those numbers, that's your code for that. All right, I think you may be looking at it through the eyes of a perfectionist. I think that's really solid. I think the head, you know, again, the shoulder bumps into the chin maybe a little bit and drags the head around. If the chin was off the chest, depends, you're aware of glasses. If your chin was off your chest, then you might find that your shoulders can complete their rotation without the head and neck being sort of forced to follow that. But I'll contemplate that with you when I'm outside in a second. All right, I think that's probably enough for now. Quite a bit of info there. So mainly indemnifying what you're already doing. Okay, but I'll get to it. Let's jump outside and have a look-see at what Coach would say to you. Actually, I had second thoughts. I've been a little bit naughty here, Pier, and I've used somebody else's work to demonstrate what we're after. This is a very good, clear and concise illustration. Just saves me time, really. So I've stolen, I mean, it's good work, so it's worth paying attention to. You can see the contrast between driver and iron swing here. The more downward, sort of steeper angle of approach on the iron contrasted by the driver, but the head position is critical to all of this. The head gives away the centeredness, or the location of the center of gravity, and you know, it's deliberately being kept back and from moving towards the target. In the driver instance, on the right and on the left, it's being allowed to shift towards the target. Now, I just think that you could get a lot of love from middle and long iron golf clubs using the same mode as is illustrated for the driver here. So what I'm saying is, from sort of 6 iron upwards, you could swing with driver vibes in this illustration in the context of your center. You could keep your center behind the ball and stay behind the ball and get a lot of love and get a lot of you know, really, really good shots. You, with your 7 iron downwards, you can lean into it a little bit more and hit down a little bit more, because you know, the loft on the club and the forward lean of the shaft will allow you to do it, which is a point I've already made, I know, but nice illustration this. And if you've been paying attention to the website, you'll see me using this as an example of something good that exists on the internet and on the social media feeds that we all get pelted by, whereas Hi Pierre, intrepidly we're outside. Now I've rigged something up on the ground. I've stabbed that into the ground because I've got the benefit of grass here. If you can imagine, if this was your stand bag and you see the clubs sticking out, perhaps if I can get my angles right, sticking out of the top of your bag here, you could extend this alignment pole further out. And down here you can see, whoopsie, down here you can see I've got a golf ball. So I'm going to place you in front here so you get a good view of what I'm talking about. Just about see the golf ball there. Now, if I set up sufficiently well, let's just put you slightly further away. Saving me the editing skills. Here we go. Homespun, that's the beauty of it. All right, you'll have to forgive the casuals. All right, but you can see here, I prefer putting this on this side of the head. All right, and what that will do, it'll allow you to make a full-scale backswing as you would wish, and then as you move forwards, you're almost feeling like your head stays back against this. Well, not almost, you are feeling like your head stays back against this pole. All right, so as you hit through, whoopsie, there we go. So might take a bit of faffing around, as you can see mine, a bit homespun, but that's the beauty of it. Inexpensive way to set up a practice scenario. And this is just gently touching my head. And as I move through the phase of my backswing, I can stay centered. If I do move off, I'll feel a bit of pressure I'm putting on the side of this pole. And then as I move forwards, I'm trying to keep my head back against that pole. That will generate plenty of centripetal force. I'm still hitting it on my right. I'm doing all the things that all the virtues we've extolled. But you could have this pole sticking out of your golf bag. If you can imagine, you put your golf bag stand on, make sure the ball isn't anywhere near the legs of the stand bag. That could be sticking out of your bag, and you're practicing away, making sure your head stays steady in the forward swing. So just additional sort of impetus on what we've been doing so far. Yes, there are times when we might have a short iron, and I'll emphasize this, I probably didn't make it as clear in the video, having watched it back just a moment ago. But with your short irons, with loads of loft and a forward-leaning shaft, you can afford to get into this territory and hit down on it more. Do that with a driver. It's def on a stick. You want to start this side with your driver and your long irons because they've got straight faces and backward-leaning shafts if you examine them closely. All right, and it's this way. Okay, so a certain amount of love from this for short irons, a lot of love for this for most shots, and particularly driver. Staying in the same place, however you achieve it. There's a cool little example that you can set up on the driving range, so your practice sessions are fun and engaging and all the cool things that we like. Now, in other news, I'm just going to move the camera a little bit so you can get a slightly closer look at yours truly. Now, when you set up posture-wise, if your upper back is rounded, that will limit the amount of rotation that you can do. Now, I think we can see you get a significant amount of rotation by the end of your backswing. The only things that I would make you specifically aware of if your upper back is just still a little bit rounded and your chin drops into your chest, and again, that might be because you wear specs, so you're having to adjust your head angle to get a good view of the ball. If you pick your chin up off of your chest, it might well allow your upper body to rotate more freely. So to illustrate that, if my chin is down sitting on my chest, apologies if I'm fouling the microphone here, the chin is sitting on your chest. When your shoulders get to a certain point, they'll drag your head out of position, which it looks a little bit like. Similarly, if you're trying to keep your left arm very straight in the backswing, then what will happen is you'll start to recruit other parts of your body, like your legs, for example, to rotate more. If you straighten your right leg, soften, let's move this out of the way, soften your left leg as a result, which doesn't really look like there's a massive reverse pivot to me. But again, when the left arm is super stiff, most people can only get to about horizontal. If you soften it, you can actually rotate more without sacrificing where your head is positioned. So it might be worth experimenting with a slightly softer left arm backswing and seeing if that allows you to complete your backswing, maybe sacrificing the beauty or the aesthetic appearance of a dead straight left arm, which people seem to love, but it's not actually critically important. You see tons and tons of players succeeding without keeping that left arm dead stiff and straight. Bit of softness for most people will allow you to complete that rotation without sort of either that rounded posture. If we improve that as much as we can, draw the shoulder blades towards one another, keep the chin clear of the chest. All right, almost you could ball up a fist and stick it under your chin here and just kind of practice. Maybe even get a camera set up like I've got here and just rig it up so you can see where you're at. When you rotate, you should be able to complete your rotation and still stay in the same place. To be honest, these days it's minimal from what I can see. I don't think it's too terribly exaggerated at all. Certainly you'll see, as you saw on the video there, you saw Sevi, Ballesteros, fine player, and John Rahm also. They do move a little off centre. They come back somewhat, but then they stay there, hit through, and then release pursuant to that. Those are obviously driver swings I've put on there. You can lean in a little bit more, as you can see some players getting a little bit more kind of that way through their iron shots. But again, short iron shots tends to be the case, you know, or certainly 7 iron downwards. I think I've made that point sufficiently well, sufficiently many times, but
Again, I think it's certainly not a good idea to be going this way in your driver swing, which is probably why, you know, your fuller scale shots have suffered historically. But I do hope we're witnessing you know, progress there, and you can report back to me on that one. All right, I think that's a couple of ideas for now that you can crack on with, and will only lead to better things. But really, really good work on the whole, mate. Really impressed and proud to say I'm your coach, and you're moving forwards in that vein. Could say more, but yeah, got to try and keep it sensible on a monthly basis. Keep up the good work. Be good to check in with you, I guess, back end of January. Cheers, Pierre. Take care. Bye.